Community Service District Board of Directors. I'd like to announce the meeting is being recorded. Let's do roll call.
Director Grant.
Here.
Dr. Plott.
Here.
Dr. Sipos.
Here.
Dr. Dessler.
Here.
Dr. Freeman.
Here.
Dr. Hobart.
Here.
Dr. Tom.
Here.
All right. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, Anascoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Consent agenda. Does anyone have items they wish to pull?
I just want to note we just don't have that invoice yet for the junk buggers, but we know what it's going to cost. It's for picking up good items during move out to sell during the gift sale.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Made by Toplift. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Sipos. Any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, let's go to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We're all together again here in person. This is great.
Nice.
I'm loving it. Okay, public comment period. This is the time for any member of the public to speak on any matter that is not on today's agenda. Do we have any requests for public comment? Mr. Soria, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. So I was asked by some board members after spending 2.5, 3 weeks in a wheelchair. Let me make it perfectly clear that wheelchair and I are not friends. It is a tool. I am a user. But they wanted me to give an input on the mobility through Isla Vista in a wheelchair. And I roamed around, well, not just mostly in the business district. And I have to say, the sidewalks are in poor condition for mobility in a wheelchair. There's a lot of uplifted slabs. It can be easily rectified with some quickcrete, give it a transition, but it would still break off because those slabs are constantly moving. So this is something that city works, or not city, but county works. They want to consider as an endeavor. There was some attempts at fixing it with a jackhammer and trying to make a transition to it. But as an engineer, I have to say it was a good attempt, but it wasn't I should have put it was an effective attempt. On a funny note, I almost got bucked from my wheelchair a couple times approaching some of these at full speed and hitting them and coming to a complete stop was like hitting an ejection seat. But I think that the mobility, especially considering American Disabilities Act, ADA, is something that the county needs to consider. And I personally believe Isla Vista as a community, as part of Santa Barbara County, we're a little bit behind on ADA standard for mobility through particularly the business loop, as I call it. So something to consider going forward to talk to county works about.
Thank you for your input. And please share a list of some of those spots that are problem spots.
As an engineer, I already have a draft and map.
Awesome. Thank you for your comment.
Thank
for your
you.
diligence, and thank you for being here and healthy. Okay. We're going to move to discussion action items. The first one up is Community Festival's annual report.
Okay, well, yeah, we got only a brief update after Deltopia because it's only 3 days later. So this is more detailed and includes the rest of the year. Part of our budget.
Good.
Yeah. I'll share it.
All right, diving into the festival report for today, we're going to start off recapping the spring festival. I'll do a little reminder of how our fall festival arts centered event went, and then I'll talk about some ideas for next year, improvements, and some goals we can have looking forward. So starting with, well, here's the overview I just mentioned, but has a really great picture on it. So we put these A-frames all around our event with QR codes to all of our resources on our webpage. So even though we did a lot of marketing in the week before, we also had a lot of physical reminders on the day of that were really effective. So next slide. This is an overview of the board goals that we have for specifically for Deltopia. But we want to provide safe, fun, and healthy options that promote Isla Vista arts and culture. We want to celebrate our community, support local businesses, gave Isla Vista the ability to control its own narrative, to have a local event under Keep It Safe, Keep It Local, and to reduce strain on county medical services, which is something new that we added in this year. You can see the little face icons. That was part of our featured artist design that was in all of our marketing materials. Most. So our approach is the same as it's always been. Next slide, is to really meet the community where they're at. So whether that be safety, harm reduction, intentional art, traffic control, or just maximizing visibility as a whole, we want to make sure that the community is met wherever they are with the resources that they need and that they know about them ahead of time. Next slide. So the first thing is all the safety resources that we provided on this day. We had 2 wellness checkpoints, which acted as first aid tents that were able to redirect people to proper care if needed, or to treat any small minor wounds or bandages needed. We also had 2 safety stations in Little Acorn Park that were actually in between both of our wellness checkpoints. So if you just needed a snack or some water or a place to charge your phone or a safe walk home, that was available to you in our space. We also had our recovery center at the community center in partnership with Good Samaritan, which acted as a place for people to rest and recover with their vitals being consistently monitored if needed. And then we had our 24 restrooms that we put across Isla Vista, in the community center parking lot, in Little Acorn Park, and then all along Sabado Tarde. We had the health and safety vending machine, which you all know about and is always there. And then we also did our interactive resource map, which again was accessible leading up to the event, and then also on a ton of yard signs on Del Playa on the actual day of the event. When we talk about harm reduction, we started off super early with our efforts at 7 a.m. distributing over 700 local bagels from Yet's Bagels with drink testing kits sponsored by UCIV, drug testing strips, and Narcan. So what we did is we put all of the bagels in the back of one of the bikes and we had them riding around Del Playa. It was a huge hit. We planned to do it for about 3 hours, but we ran out of all the bagels within the first hour. People were chasing Richard down the street. It was a sight to see. In addition to that, we also partnered with Yet's Bagels to do a breakfast bagel contest in the morning. So whether you got a free bagel or whether you just ate breakfast, if you submitted a picture to us and tagged Yet's Bagels, you actually got a chance to win a $100 gift card. So we also did see a lot of more people eating breakfast than I feel that we typically have in the past. We also distributed over 5,000 cans of water throughout Isla Vista, 300 gallons at our event. We sold out over 20,000 tacos between our 4 amazing vendors. And then we also had a mocktail bar, which was something new that we added this year in partnership with Life of the Party. We also stuck with some intentional art this year. So as always, we had our battle of the bands and DJs where we empowered 3 bands and 2 DJs for highly compensated performance slots. And then we also awarded the top band a $1,500 value music video, which is something new that we did this year. We also sponsored for artists to create a sidewalk mural in high pedestrian traffic locations in order to draw attention to the crosswalks. I will say I thought this was extremely successful. I saw more people using the crosswalk at that stop sign than I think I ever have, both in my time living in Ivy and in my time working at the community center. So just something to keep in mind in the future. We also had interactive art, and the goal of all of this was really to intertwine art, community, and safety in a way that felt authentic to what was already happening in the space. Also, Sweet Jane was super kind to donate some goodie bags. So the first 100 people that came to the festival also got a little goodie bag from Sweet Jane. So a little more on traffic control. So in addition to the sidewalks, which you can see one example up there, it says look both ways. Little just difficult to read, but that's what it says. We also coordinated with Uber, Lyft, and Uber Eats to notify drivers of closed roads and the designated drop-off pickup areas. And then we also installed 2 temporary stop signs on Embarcadero Del Mar to slow traffic before that crosswalk that was painted. So yes, and then we also placed signage along El Clio and the Loop to notify people coming in and drivers coming in of where those locations are to hopefully help direct that traffic. And then last but not least, in an effort to maximize our visibility of all of the amazing things that we did, we put over 80 yard signs throughout Isla Vista, directing people to safety resources, restrooms, water, free food. The interactive map was on all of them. We also had a lot of education efforts on campus. We used the DigiKnows and made sure people knew about the wellness checkpoints, the recovery center, and just general festival awareness of where you can find resources if you need them. We also launched a new door hanger this year on every door in Isla Vista, encouraging people to take ownership and responsibility of their behavior on Deltopia and to make a positive impact by notifying your friends about it and just making sure everyone around you stays safe. And we also did a week-long robust social media campaign that had meme-based content to encourage the Keep It Local messaging, the resource map, our free public bathrooms, and the recovery center. And then we also promoted our headlining band's music video. We did our breakfast share contest, which I already talked a little bit about. And then, like I said, we encouraged Isla Vista to step up and reduce the strain on neighboring community resources. So just to give you a little visual of how all that went, here's some examples of our meme-based reels, our vending machine reel. You can see the door hanger over there on the right. And then essentially this thing that says, "Hi, Isla Vista, it's time to step up," is the door hanger transitioned into an Instagram post. In addition to all of these efforts on social media, we were also positively mentioned in 20 news articles about our efforts. So talking about either the checkpoints, the recovery center, or any of the other efforts that we did. So there's a lot of bad press about Deltopia, but there was some good notes. Outcome. So this year we had over 6,000 people in attendance throughout the day. 100 people were served at our wellness checkpoints. 2 of those people required an ambulance. We had over 14 served at the recovery center, but about 40 people utilized a safe space. So what that means is 14 people actually needed that consistent vital tracking and potentially even redirected to proper care. And 40 people were there charging their phone, maybe sitting with a friend that was getting care, or just eating a snack in some air-conditioned space. Of all of those people, 3 of them required an ambulance transportation out of the space. Our safety station served over 5,000. And then the outcome of our big social media campaign is that we had over 6,000 likes across all of our posts, and we had a reach of about 100,500 accounts on Instagram across all of the posts. And that's with ads and without ads on some of the things. We got more foot traffic than I think I've ever seen on our Instagram page throughout that week. So I would say that the meme-based reel content that we outsourced was incredibly successful this year. In reflection, so these are some notes that were brought to me by our community partners. So they did not feel welcome as part of the larger Deltopia efforts going on in our community from law enforcement and medical agencies. We also saw that law enforcement used our safety resource booths, our wellness checkpoint, you can see it in this picture, as a place to write tickets, which drastically impacted the community member willingness to actually utilize those resources and fear of getting in trouble. And this was happening pretty consistently throughout the day. 911 was also instructed as to be a place for us to go to as a resource. So if anyone needed that further care, we were told to call 911. However, they did not always respond to the people that we had on site. So for example, we had EMTs and an EMT supervisor on site whom tried to call 911 at a certain point to get access to more care for somebody, and 911 did not respond and did not come out unless they were accompanied by a law enforcement officer, which is something also.
Can I interrupt, just ask a question about it? Help me understand that. So when you say that when 911 didn't respond, is that didn't respond to the call, or once contacted, they said we're not sending anybody?
So I didn't know this, but you can actually text 911. And 911 can respond over text. And so 911 was texted, you know, there's an emergency regarding an individual, we need more care for this person. And they responded and said, we will not come out unless this message is coming from a law enforcement officer, unless accompanied by law enforcement. And they did not come until our supervisor was able to connect with the law enforcement officer. The law enforcement officer then touched base with that patient, and then 911 came out for that person. Yeah.
I'm deeply troubled and speechless.
Mm-hmm. And this is, you know, this goes back to the first point on here, is that these people that I brought in to help offset some of the strain on these resources did not feel welcome at any point throughout the day, whether that be if they were asking for help, whether that be if they were asking to be notified in the morning briefing, if anything changed about the plans, or even just in general when they went to introduce themselves as, you know, the recovery center or wellness checkpoints to the people in charge. They were also met with that same lack of welcomingness. I want to say that nicely. So, yes.
I'm speechless, sorry. Director Freeman, go ahead.
Sort of related to a different way that hasn't been mentioned today above welcomeness. So am I correct in remembering that we weren't allowed to use the word first aid, which is of course the word everyone would think to use for what we were offering? I was curious with our photo as first aid.
Originally, yes, but we consistently kindly pushed back and asked if it was okay if what, the existing tent that they used already said first aid. They also weren't supposed to be labeled as EMTs, but we pushed back and asked if that was okay because that was the uniform, or what was okay to say, like, can it say like, event medical staff, and when we asked about it again, they said it was fine for the tent to say that as long as it was also identified as a wellness checkpoint. So I ordered banners for the bottom, and they said it was fine for them to be identified as EMTs at the event as long as they stayed within the premises of the event, which they did.
At least something good happened.
Right? Yeah. We were really glad about that too, because otherwise we would have had to figure out how to purchase or rent more tents. And so, yeah, we were thankful for that.
Well, I'm going to let you continue with the presentation, but I'm going to have some comments about that later. My mind is just kind of spinning at that.
Do you need me to take over?
Please proceed with the presentation.
Yeah, of course. So on that note, one of the biggest improvements that I want to draw our awareness to for 2026 is the hope to integrate the medical and enforcement teams with harm reduction and safety resources. So I think, we got a lot of public comments about this following the event as well. These things would work better if they were working together. Additionally, fall planning meetings, like fall planning meetings for Deltopia with service providers and key agencies. We started meetings in January. I think November was the first meeting that we had with Tesla, but then we consistently had meetings starting in January. And I will say at that point, it already seemed too late. So I'm really going to encourage our partners and everyone to start having monthly meetings in the fall. Additionally, I'm looking for greater community involvement. So we did get some community involvement, but I would like to see more next year for volunteering and fundraising efforts, either leading up to the event or on the actual day of. I think something like this is going to be the most successful when the community can really come together to both make it happen and to see the results. And then last but not least, I want to do a featured artist fall search this year. So as of right now, we've been finding artists through word of mouth, people that are interested, that are local, that are vetted for. But I think this year we want to do something similar that we did for the Battle of the Bands and do like not a battle of the artists, but have artists submit their work and then we can all decide a featured artist, making it a little bit more of like a contest to support. So that is Deltopia. I only have 2 super quick slides to remind you about our Fall Fest. So I'll go over them pretty quickly and then I'll give you a summary of everything. So in the fall this year, we had our Noche de Ofrendas, Day of the Dead Arts Festival and Night Market. So a little recap of what that was. It was a nightlife alternative filled with artistic and cultural experiences. We engaged with our Indigenous community. We also had over 50 community partners tabling. We had over 500 attendees throughout the day, and then we were able to provide a lot of great exposure for local BIPOC artists. Learning opportunities from this, attendance drastically decreased by 9 p.m., although we did hold it Halloween weekend. Halloween weekend is drastically smaller and less loud than it typically has been in the past. So we didn't see a lot of people past 9 p.m. And then thrift vendors saw less success than daytime events. So next year, I really would recommend focusing more on the art gallery portion of it. It's going to require less funding, but also I thought that was the most impactful part of this event that I saw in the community. And also I would love to keep the cultural showcase that we had because I thought it was a really great interactive educational experience for people of all ages. So to summarize all that and kind of look ahead to next year, I'll leave you with these few goals for both, I guess, festivals, if you want to call them, for both festivals. One is I'd love to maintain the successful elements, maintain them. I don't really think that there's a lot of room for expansion, especially within our budget, but I do want to maintain and make sure that they continue to be successful. So those are things like the free food, including that breakfast service that we started this year, water, bathrooms. I'd love to do the recovery center and the first aid tents again. entertainment from local top voted artists, the innovative traffic control, like the stop signs and also the sidewalk art. And then from the other event, like I said, the art gallery and the cultural showcase. I'd like to remove some elements that had less community engagement. For example, the specific Uber and Lyft drop-off zone was completely ignored because it's one place in IV and Del Playa is a long street, right? And so we did not see barely any utilization of that zone. What we did see is that Uber drivers knew where the road closures were, and I do think that helped where they were dropping people off. They weren't trying to drive onto Sabado or Del Playa or engage with people in that way. But I just don't think that the actual one zone was super effective this year. So that's something that I'll put out there. And then also the night market. So having the thrift vendors in the evening as part of one of our festivals, I just didn't find that to be super successful, and I would recommend removing it next year. And then last but not least, how can we maximize our community involvement? So one, I'd love just to see more fundraising efforts at these types of events from different community organizations. I'd love to see more community tabling, both at our spring festival and if we do an art gallery in the fall. In general, it's always a goal of mine to try and find more sponsors of different types. And then something I learned from the festival this year, I do think just sticking to one stage, having all of the entertainment on that stage, we did that last year and I found it effective, tried to expand to see if that helped with crowd control, and it didn't really do much. So one stage, maximize all the community fun in one area for the stage. And that's everything. Open for questions, comments, feedback, all the things.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Yeah.
Questions from the board? Director Deschler.
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask if the yard signs are reusable for every year?
They're not reusable for every fest because they're different art on them. However, we do reuse them by painting over them for things like the yard sale or any other projects you need yard signs for.
The other thing I wanted to ask you was if maybe you said this already, or maybe it was in previous presentation, but I wanted to find out what the numbers of people that were served by the first aid EMT folks at the tents, and also the number of people that were at the recovery center.
Yeah, so there was 100 people served at the tents. And then at the recovery center, 14 people had their vitals tracked throughout the day. So we're using like the medical supervision side of it. And then about 40 people were just there as a safe space to recover without needing any medical supervision.
And so you mentioned that there was, you saw one or several times where you would call 911 and people weren't responsive. And I wonder, when that happened, was it because the call was coming? I mean, it just seems very interesting to me. Can they determine where the call is coming from, and that's why they weren't responsive? Like, do we have any sense of why sheriff wasn't, or dispatch wasn't responsive?
I have not
Okay.
heard anything about it, but I do have those text messages. So if you guys would like to see the text message thread that our EMT staff received from them, I can share that with you. Yeah, if needed.
Thank you.
Director Freeman.
On that note, I didn't quite understand, you described it in one case as coming from law enforcement, in another case as accompanied by law enforcement. I wasn't certain it was like, so they wanted the person to have a law enforcement officer next to them, or they wanted to only be dispatched by law enforcement, or they will only send an EMT if there was a law enforcement officer with them.
So the latter, they wanted to have the enforcement officer dispatched to them about this case. Yeah. And I'm speaking to one specific incident. I know for sure that happened that day. And looking back at my numbers, I believe they only,
And
only 2 people required ambulance. So 1 out of those 2 people I know they were not responsive to.
And on our side, the person who was texting was one of the EMT people.
It was the EMT supervisor
That's just
That we
ridiculous.
hired.
Yeah, that just it really does feel like it's like a level of unwelcomeness between organizations.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
Director Hobart.
The only thing that I can think of, do you know if they tried to like cite that person before taking them in the ambulance? That's the only thing I can think of is if they wanted that interaction with law enforcement to like write a citation or something before having that person transported to a hospital.
I do think the specific person I was there for, this did escalate a lot after that. I think when our dispatch sent the message, it was a medical emergency that they were working with, and it did end up escalating quite a bit when enforcement was involved to much more than that.
I think that's maybe something that we could talk to maybe Lieutenant Schmidt about, just to try to understand like what their reasoning is. Because I mean, to me, that's concerning if the priority is citing somebody before giving them medical attention. I feel like the objective should be for them to receive medical attention first and foremost. Maybe that's something we should talk to them about and learn more.
My comment on this is I think this warrants an investigation. The allegations are extremely troubling to me that for anyone in the community to not be able to feel like they can trust being able to call 911, it's extremely concerning. And I would like to see those text messages, and I would like for us to do some digging with both law enforcement and EMS, county public health, and fire to figure out why that might have been the response, because the public deserves to be able to feel like they can trust their dispatch system. And
Was this the incident at our event?
The one towards the end of the event.
Yeah.
Director Destro?
To this point, I remember when Lieutenant Tesla was here, and I think maybe this was an email. Oh, okay, maybe not. And there was a conversation about how do the folks at our tent at the first aid tent interact if there is a medical emergency. And I remember him saying, just walk over to Trigo. Am I making that up?
That might have been something that was said at one point.
Okay.
However,
Yeah.
through us trying to collaborate or not collaborate, I would say like try to work with the larger system. That was part of the parameters given to us, is that we were not to bring anyone over there by foot. The only circumstance we were allowed to do that was if and only if we could not make a call. Like if 911, the call was not going through.
Got it.
We had no communication at all with the field treatment site. And the field treatment site similarly wasn't supposed to bring people to us either. So we were not supposed to bring people over there, and they were not to bring people to us. So there was a very big lack of integration with the services as a whole.
Yeah, I think your idea about starting meetings earlier is a good one, but I think that I think that there's some real kind of cultural conversations that need to happen in terms of that IVCSD is doing its part to make sure that there's resources in place, and we need to make sure that the sheriff's office is recognizing that and also is working with our resources. I mean, that's the goal, is to provide these services for the entire community, so they're providing less. So I think, Spencer, I agree with you. I think that there needs to be something formal initiated with the sheriff's department and the EMS, fire. Yeah.
Can I ask a question too about, you mentioned that law enforcement was stationing officers at the EMS tent and the recovery center. And that is confusing to me, because I view these spaces as kind of like sanctuary spaces where we want people to feel comfortable being able to access services without the fear of being arrested or cited, which is what leads people to try to avoid law enforcement contacts during Beltopia. What was the planning around that like, and was that something that you were aware was going to happen before the day?
Great question. So what I was told leading up to the day is that enforcement would not be at our event at all unless we requested their presence. That was what was shared with me. That was part of our plan, because we had security there. We had first aid support. And so if we need law enforcement, we were told to reach out to them. However, my experience at the event was much different. And I did initiate multiple conversations with different sheriffs to ask, you know, hey, is this where you're supposed to be stationed? Are we like, because I was a little bit confused myself. I did see people in front of the recovery center. And when I did talk to them, I learned that they were to be moving throughout that entire block, which I did see throughout the day. And same thing with the people who were in front of our art area. They were citing tickets extremely early in our event because they had reason to. There were every single scenario, there was something that had happened that gave them the right to do so. I did notice that there was a lot of lingering in our event space, which did, again, not go against, but it did make it feel less of a sanctuary because so many people were getting tickets. And when you use our event spaces like our art tables or our wellness checkpoints to write those tickets and sit people down right there in front of my vendors, I mean, even our vendors were extremely uncomfortable. They said they saw more people arrested that day than they've seen in their entire life, which is not something that I want for our partners to feel as well when they're part of our event. And it was a pretty big issue throughout the entire event. So even when we were setting up, we weren't even fully open for operations. There were already people getting tickets at our event, and it just continued throughout the day. And my interactions also when I would ask, like, hey, is everything okay? What's going on? This is my event. You know, did something happen? I was not met with a very good response either.
When you say your event, can you define what you're talking about?
Yeah, so Little Acorn Park. And then I keep calling it Perfect People's Park, but it's Perfect Park, which is the little, yeah, right next to the parking lot. It went all the way back to about this part of the trees, and then the community center parking lot, and then the community center. So you've got this like across the street area. And the biggest place I saw ticket writing was in Perfect Park, right by the sidewalk right there, and then also at our wellness checkpoints.
At the checkpoint?
At the check. So that was that photo actually. Go back to that slide, Jonathan. I actually took a photo of it when I was there because I thought it was important. You can see that.
Where, which one?
It's on page.
It's
It's on the reflection, page 12. Yeah, right there. So you can see like there's a first aid tent and then multiple people throughout the day. I think when I asked them approximately how many people they were using their table to write tickets for, and it was at least 10.
I mean, the challenge with that is that that's the intersection by which people are going, they're closing that street. So it makes sense there's an aggregation of law enforcement there. I saw that too. It would be interesting to think about perhaps moving the first aid tent somewhere else so that it's not at that intersection where people are going into DP.
The reason we do have it there though is because that's the easiest ambulance access point.
They want
Got it.
And they also like it there too. And I think it's one thing to have, you know, law enforcement in a specific area because it is that, you know, entrance into Del Playa.
Yeah.
But I think the issue really came when they were using the tables for the wellness checkpoint to write the tickets, because then that signals to everyone, hey, you don't want to go to that wellness checkpoint. They're writing tickets over there. And same thing, like if you walk by the recovery center, maybe you have someone who needs help and you want to bring your friend there, and then you see 5 law enforcement officers standing outside. Maybe it's not outside the doors directly, but if they're standing in front of the parking lot right there taking a break, it also doesn't signal, hey, maybe I want to go over there. You know, that wasn't the most professional way to say that. But.
And I mean, personally, when I went to go get tacos, yeah, it was almost like a border of police officers, like around the entire park, not even just in that area in the picture, but everywhere. And I mean, that's not even the entrance to DP, that's Sabado. Like, I don't really think that that's necessary for that to be a place for them to be congregating to write tickets, because the majority of the like event itself is DP, and that's not DP. And on top of that, that street is open. That part of Sabado didn't have a roadblock, at least when I was over there, like that specific where that picture is taken. So I don't really know like why they congregate there. And I mean, yeah, it was definitely uncomfortable from my perspective, and I saw a lot of people like that were hesitant to even approach the festival itself when there's like 6-7 police officers like all sitting there with people on the curbs. So I think that might be something good to bring up early on, like for next year, because I think that's very counterintuitive to what the festival is, and also just in general, I think that the relations between what we provided and what they're providing aren't great. And to me, that's concerning because their whole point is that they want to reduce the strain and they want people to be safe. So I feel like that doesn't really match, like their actions on Deltopia don't match what they claimed they cared about for it. So that's troubling to me because I don't know, as a student, it doesn't really feel like they have our needs in mind at all.
And I'll touch to that too. I did see a drastic difference from the festival this year versus the year before. So the year before, I don't think we had many interactions with law enforcement and did not see them at our event at all, I would say. Maybe, and I don't know that we even called that we needed anything. I have no recollection of that, and it was not an issue at all last year. So this is actually something new that we saw this year that we did not see or have any issues with the year before, which I think is also important.
I wonder too if it's like the increased police that they're bringing from places outside of Santa Barbara. And I know that what we had talked about was wanting to almost do like our own type of like Isla Vista orientation, something to like kind of educate the police officers coming in from out of town. They didn't seem very open to that, but I think maybe that's something that we should push for because clearly we have a lot of officers congregating in areas that if you were told that they weren't going to be congregating in. And I mean, yeah, especially if you're seeing the difference this year, the only thing that really changed was that increased police presence, which just makes me think it's people coming from out of town that aren't respecting like Isla Vista.
Alternatively, this is mildly off topic, but people were getting, a couple weeks ago, my friend was complaining that a lot of people were walking on her like private property because the police were at all the streets and like they were scared to walk down the streets with the police on them and were walking on people's houses. In people's houses instead.
I will be your anger translator and say specifically the request to law enforcement that the community, including IVCSD and other partners that are engaged in harm reduction, to speak with out-of-town officers was made at the Isla Vista Safe meeting and was rejected by the sheriff's office.
Wait, what was rejected?
A request for us and other community partners to be able to do sort of a workshop briefing, educational meeting, brief as it could be on that day, to help out of town law enforcement officers better understand the community and community.
Yeah, I think that maybe we should just
We'll
continue to speak with them about that.
we'll talk about that a little more in the next item. I got a couple of things I want to say before we move, which is, first is a question about our media strategy. You mentioned that a lot of our media is focused on social media and reels and the meme content. And is that specific? We try to do that specifically to the Isla Vista community.
So we only post, if we do an ad, it's very specific. It's only Isla Vista and we target ages, I think I actually made it 17 for this, just to, in case there's any youth, like I wanted everyone, this is safe, like how to be safe. I think 17 to 35, I think is the scope, is the age range. And anyway, it's only people who are in Isla Vista. So it's very, very localized and we don't do anything until the week of. But we post a lot the week of, but that's also kind of how we even boost our engagement even more, because we're almost, I don't want to say spamming people, but we're like giving people so much, and when they engage with one thing, the next thing we post, either that day or the next day, it comes to the top of their feed. So that was a new strategy that we did this year. Like we've always done things the week of, but we had so many to go out this week because we got creative with how we share that messaging. And like I said, we saw the most success with that.
And do we send out press releases at all?
On the week of, we send out one to only our local news sources.
So we don't send to.
Or we actually sent one after too.
We sent a follow-up.
A follow-up, yeah.
But prior to Deltopia, do we send anything to LA outlets, to San Francisco, to?
Nothing.
No, I'm seeing heads change shape. Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. Because I know that there was a lot of media coverage that appeared to me to be sort of an invitation to out-of-towners to come to our community. And been trying to get to the bottom of where that came from. And it sounds like it couldn't have come from us. Okay.
And
I'll just clarify, we did not do a festival press release, and we reached out to the press to share about our event. And then they came to us, but we did not do a pre.
So just like a phone call, email to the reporters that we
Let them know
That we
we're
know.
having the event.
Yeah.
But then we did a post.
I think that's a wise strategy. Thank you for sharing it. And just one last thing here. What are you familiar with what Cal Poly does during St. Fred's Day?
yeah, so that was actually something that they were piloting. So it was the same, not sobering center. They called it a safe observation site, an SOS. And they piloted that at St. Fraddy's. The thing that they noticed though is that it was removed from the action, for lack of a better word. It wasn't directly where the people were. So they weren't necessarily meeting the community where they were at. They were just providing a resource for people to access. And through that, Good Samaritan shared with us, it wasn't as successful as it could have been. But yes, it was the same model, same staffing. We called it the Recovery Center instead. And then we made it much closer to the action, very walkable to where people were.
That's awesome. And beyond that, with their concert, are you familiar enough with it to describe how what we do is different from what Cal Poly did this year with their concert?
From what I know, because I read a few articles about it too, to kind of prepare what could happen to us. One thing I noticed is that they had a lot of fencing, and that was the first thing that went down when the flood of people came in and became a serious danger, and they had limited spots. And so that's something that right off the bat we do differently. We don't do any fencing in the space so that people can really come and go as they please. And there isn't a limited amount of spots per se. Now, if, there's a certain amount of people, I think it's, I don't know off the top of my head, but if there is a certain amount of people in the park and it's unsafe, we do crowd control and we push people away, but we haven't had to do that. So that's one major difference. Another major difference is I'm pretty sure they do it super early in the morning and you have to RSVP ahead of time. We don't have that as well. We did ours later in the afternoon after people have already been out and about for a little bit, and there's no RSVP or anything required ahead of time. So that's also something different. And then also the one that Cal Poly does is through the school. So it is very, you must have a student ID and things like that. And as you know, we don't have any requirements like that for our events because we don't want to close it off. We don't want to have any blockades because as we saw, that can turn into a much bigger safety hazard down the line.
Gotcha. Well, I think it's helpful to know sort of what we're doing, what they've done. I was really impressed by some of the success that they had this year. And, I almost wonder if we should get sort of a diplomatic envoy of Isla Vistans together to go and meet with folks in San Luis Obispo, because it's clear that they had a lot less arrests, less medical incidents. And I think that this is an instance where we, and I say the collective we, which is us, UCPD, the Sheriff's Office, County Fire, and other partners that are involved could really have a good opportunity to learn from what is working in other communities that are similar to ours. So I just want to throw that out there as a something that I would love to be.
And I will add, when you said that, it also reminded me, they also had a different experience with integration. So they were much more integrated with their larger system, with their police force, with their fire department, et cetera. They all were aware of the safe observation site, and they, I believe, were able to refer people there. But in general, our partners had a much more positive experience. I'm sorry, not positive. We'll say our partners had a much more welcoming experience when they did the safe observation site there than here.
Thank you for that. That's helpful to hear.
I'm just speculating here, but that could be a result of having things like the SNAP program there. They've already made, their police force has already made great efforts to integrate with the student community and meet the students on their terms.
They're a city.
City. Yeah. So that could also be something good. Another benefit of the SNAP program is just greater integration.
It's a great point. Okay, any other comments or questions on this item? Go ahead.
I do think that I would recommend that we send something formal to Sheriff's Department outlining some of our concerns that happen so that we can initiate a dialogue based upon some of the experiences that we've had. I think that would be very helpful to do it sooner rather than later, not to wait till the fall, because there's so many issues and I think we have an opportunity with the new lieutenant. Maybe have it be different. And then the second thing I was gonna say is that my colleague at Cal Poly is very involved in the planning of St. Friday's Day. I'm sure we could do something agendas for her to do a presentation if you wanted to do something like that. I'll just volunteer.
Volunteering our colleagues on other campuses now
Yeah.
too. I like it.
To give an update.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea.
And I'm just wondering, besides reaching out to the sheriff now with our concerns about how this went, should we also reach out to the health department because of the EMT situation? So.
Yeah, and I think maybe it might be helpful for us to put this in a motion to memorialize it. Because I agree, the health department and the EMS agency, because it sounds like that was a big part of the incident as well. Anyone would like to take a stab at making the
Let me
motion?
ask you a question. Is there an after action meeting that sheriff initiates to go? I mean, they must, right? But we're just not invited. Wouldn't you think there's an after
I would think
action
there would have
meeting
been,
to
yeah.
discuss what
I would
worked, what didn't?
We had IVC last week and we talked about it
Yeah.
then, but nothing else.
Nothing else.
Which we're about to get an update on that. But does
Oh,
anyone
Which
want to?
organization is saying county health?
Yeah.
County,
It used to
County health.
formerly public
The
health.
EMTs in county health.
I didn't know. Okay. Interesting.
So I'll suggest that we appreciate the very informative presentation on the Deltopia Spring Festival. Note that we have some very serious concerns about the interface between the Sheriff's Department and the Health Department staff, and both with ourselves and our vendors, and that we would like to initiate an after action interaction with them that's documented in writing that would memorialize and address those concerns.
Okay,
Second.
sounds like a motion made by Topliff and seconded by Deschler. I haven't gotten public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Go ahead, Henry.
So first of all, I want to say thank you for making it clear to the town or locals to keep it local. With that said, I'm a realist, a scientist. What I did for a living, I'm retired now, but I'm still a realist. I haven't retired from being a realist. With that said, your biggest problem is out-of-towners. Always has been, always will be. With that said, a lot of the situation with law enforcement on Sabo Tarde had to do with what I call through flow between spaces, between apartment complexes where people are coming from Del Playa onto Sabo Tarde. Why were they doing that? Well, if you say that there was law enforcement on Del Playa, well, there was more people in law enforcement, more civilians in law enforcement on Del Playa. You know, let's look at the facts. This could also be another thing about the way that 911 was responding. You know, I hate to say this, but there comes a point where you get sick and tired of the out-of-towners. You do. I think that, you know, EMS, law enforcement, whatever, they're kind of tired of, you know, services from other parts of the county being sacrificed to cater to this year a larger crowd than last year of out-of-towners. You know, and that's not a way to approach this. It's very professional, but you have to consider the human psyche involved in this. And there comes a point where it becomes a very callous type of approach. And I don't agree with that. I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just pointing out at the psychological demographic behind it. Now, one of the things I do have to say in defense of, you know, the way that they said we can't respond with emergency medical personnel unless they're in the accompaniment of law enforcement. There were cases where EMTs were attacked last year. You know, they went to take care of somebody and there was people throwing stuff and everything like that. I know that if I was an EMT, I wouldn't want to go in there without, some sort of law enforcement presence to back me up. Here you are, you're trying to fix somebody that's broken, trying to fix somebody that could be having a, reaction to a certain compound or something like that. And you've got people kind of getting in the way, is for lack of a better word. You're talking about people that they get fentanyl test strips, they test the drug that they're going to do, the drug of choice, MDMA, coke, whatever, for fentanyl, test positive, and they do it anyway. Sad reality. Like I said, I'm a realist, but it's a sad reality. And that, there is proof of that's happened. It's always comes down to the out-of-town component, and that is what that's what you're combating mainly. Now, with respect to the news sources from out of the area, yes, they did invite people to go, yeah, the biggest party in Isle West, the biggest party in California. And I kept seeing these things popping up in my news feed, and I'm like, why are you doing this? Do you know the strain that this puts on the community members? Do you understand the strain that it puts on services? But yet, media sources from San Francisco all the way out to Utah and everything were touting this as the party of the year to be at. And yeah, it'd be great if it was locals. It'd be a great party, like the first Flowtopia was. I was there. But it's gotten to the point where now, this year, there was more out of towners than last year. And that is part of the equation as to what was happening with, positioning of law enforcement, stuff like that. Now, with that said, there was a lot of law enforcement from out of the area, like San Luis Obispo. I was talking to a bunch of San Luis Obispo police officers. You have to remember, these are city law enforcement as opposed to county sheriffs. It's two different forms of enforcing, and they were, all my interactions with everyone was really the only people I had any negative interaction with, and I didn't incite it, it was out of towners. And I went by the festival. I just kind of ghosted through there, and cruised around. I loved it. It was great. It's fantastic. But, what I did notice at the festival was the majority of people there were locals, not many out of towners. I can spot it. I've been here 38 years. I can spot a local when I see one. That's like something that's an inherent trait, whatever you want to call it. But the locals are getting the message. But why are they still inviting people from out of town? And then, like I said, the news media jumping on that bandwagon. Everybody loves a party, but until it's at their expense, then the tune changes. So, going forward, the thing to consider is the out-of-town component, as always. And yeah, reaching out to law enforcement is a good idea, and try to come up with a comprehensive plan that works together. But then there's also the thing about the I don't call it Deltopia, I call it something else. I kind of blurted it out. Lieutenant Tesla last year gave his aftermath presentation. And I'm kind of surprised that I haven't heard or seen any presentation from Lieutenant Schmidt. Oh, and by the way, one of the things that's also going on that maybe you haven't heard anything is Lieutenant Tesla has been promoted to commander. Mm-hmm. And now it's, there's that transition of, office and stuff like that. So that might be, a reason for the lack of that post-event presentation. But you guys did a great job. Don't let something like that get to you, because you did a great job as a community member, long-time community member. You've seen it, morph through different phases. Considering the odds that you were against, you did a good job, all of you. You put so much time and effort. You saw me there. Mm-hmm. It's the only person I ran into. I kind of was just floating through,
I saw you from a mile away.
Stand out like a sore thumb, especially limping around on crutches, But no, I think, going forward, the festival and everything, but the biggest point to drive home, and you're going to have a new class of people coming in from UCSB. I think the education should start in the dorms at UCSB. Don't bring in out-of-towners. Start it there. Let it permeate its way into Isla Vista, because, next year we'll have how many thousands of people moving from the dorms into IV, and yeah, I get it, first time away from home syndrome. I remember my first year, but you know, the education's gotta start at that point. You have it's what we call moment of inertia, X sub naught. That's X sub naught over there on the other side of that tree line. When they move here, now you've got inertia. And, you know, the out-of-towners is always a big issue. I'm not excusing the behavior of 911. I'm not doing that in any way whatsoever. I think it's kind of messed up, but I can understand the psyche behind it. It's not, you know, it's not cool. 911 has a purpose and a reason, but you can't dictate the level of emergency if you're not there. You only know if you're there. So I think something needs to be worked on. I think it does. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Any other comments online, Jonathan?
Not for this one.
Okay. Okay, then I'll close public comment. And we've got a motion on the table about
Can you repeat the motion?
this letter. Yes, please.
No, can you repeat the motion? please?
Are you kidding me?
Oh,
Wasn't
Of
captured on
course
the-
I can't repeat the motion.
Oh, no, we need that.
Okay, so, great report.
Let's
It
just
doesn't
do
need
the
to be in
action
it, yeah.
steps.
Okay, outreach to UCSB, to outreach to the sheriff's department and the health department about some of the troubling interactions between their staff and the event, both in writing and in the form of a meeting to happen soon.
And is that motion inclusive of the 911 incident?
Yeah, I figured that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a health department thing. right?
Fire, yeah.
Oh, fire.
Yeah.
Okay, well then throw fire.
Yeah.
department in there too.
You know, I think like, yeah, I'm still trying to show county health, I think it was like public health people.
They have nothing to do with sales.
Yeah, okay,
Oh,
yeah,
so-
so,
Well, they oversee the EMS agency.
They do?
So yeah,
okay, interesting.
But they seem to act independently, so.
yeah, that's correct. Okay, motion made by Topliff, and I think I heard a second from Deschler.
Mhm.
Okay. We've done public comment. Director Freed.
And I just want to say, like, even if like Deltopia is considered dangerous, imagine like I'm there and I call 911 and I'm like, I've run into somebody on the street, and they've got some kind of issue. Imagine 911 telling me,
Mhm.
is law enforcement there? We're not going to go there.
Yeah,
I'm less capable of judging the situation than a trained EMT. And the trained EMT talks to 911 and 911's like, no, we're not going to go. That to me is ridiculous. And that's why I like, even with like, you know, the extenuating circumstance of Deltopia, I really want us to.
And you think
analyze
they'd be
this.
concerned about liability issues too. That's a terrible
So,
breach of duty.
Director Deschler.
I don't know if we've said this enough, but I just want to thank you and your team and all the magic that you have within you to create such an amazing event. I mean, every year, your creativity just abounds. And so I just really want to acknowledge unbelievable, all the planning and effort and all the details that you all attended to. It's just really made it a really great event in so many ways. The EMTs, I was sitting by the EMT folks, they were lovely. I mean, they were proactive. They were looking out people that were sleeping or laying down too much, making sure they got out of the sun. I just thought they were really top notch. And yeah, the signage, everything. I just want to really acknowledge you and your team, all your good work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'll share that with their team too, because I also really love working with them and thought they were incredible throughout the day. Yeah.
And please add that to Good Samaritan. I was so impressed with their work at the recovery center. There's an old axiom that you can't measure prevention, and that makes it extremely hard for us to tell the story of why what you and your team are doing is so successful. But as someone that has lived here for almost 10 years now and has been around the block for Deltopias, both as a party goer, as a student, and now as a long-term resident, I can see the difference in having a positive outlet for people to be able to go to, for locals to be able to go to. And it is significant. So thank you for all of your work.
Thank you.
Okay, we've talked enough. Let's roll call, or we don't have to do roll call. I'm gonna call a question on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Do you want us to have the letter for board approval or just send it? In writing?
I didn't take it to mean that it was from the board, or at all, so I think we can handle it without board approval.
Wait, who is it from?
Is it?
Well, it's our staff have the first-hand information is
Oh,
my
I think
understanding,
it's-
yeah.
Okay.
And of course, we'll be there to help support how we can.
It's a collision on Sabado.
Okay. Item 2, Isla Vista Safe, May 2025 meeting report out. So Director Hobart and I had the chance to attend, and there were 2 main topics. The first was Deltopia response, as you might imagine. And some of the things that we discussed include, first, Elsa Granados was standing together to end sexual assault, asked a question about some of the reports that they had heard that we've discussed as a board of law enforcement interactions with young women, telling them that they were being cited and arrested to avoid being assaulted. And there was a discussion there with law enforcement, and they denied that those statements were being made. There was a good discussion about the fact that it's important that those messages aren't getting out there. This is where we talked about wanting to do sort of a briefing with out-of-town officers, and where they rejected that idea. But
Yeah,
I think that you're right. We should continue the conversation.
I think that their response to that question was that they didn't tell people to say that, but that they can't control what officers say in the field to people that they're citing as well. And I had mentioned the specific instance of a friend of mine being told that they were citing women early while she was being cited. And their response was that they can't control that, which I think has to do with out-of-town officers and like a lack of unity in what their goals are as a police force, which is why I want to say again that I think it's really important that we talk to them more about that and about briefing the out-of-town officers, because it seems like that could be where the problem is stemming from with those accounts of them blatantly saying that.
I agree. And I heard that with my own 2 ears on Deltopia as well. The second thing was a discussion about media strategy, similar to the questions that I just asked of Maya about is law enforcement sending out press releases to out-of-town outlets. And Under Sheriff Bonner acknowledged that yes, they were. He also acknowledged that he does not think that that strategy is working, and agreed to participate in a committee along with us and UCSB to review pre-Deltopia messaging for next year, which I found really helpful to hear. He even shared with me just privately an anecdote about his son and some of his son's friends and how they had heard about the event and the channels in which they had heard it. And I think that I was very satisfied with their understanding of how they can better frame and communicate their message to the public without notifying out-of-town outlets.
Was there someone there from UCSB Press?
Yes.
Press, not press,
Media?
not.
Yes.
UCSB
No,
Media? No?
Jason was there.
It's
Jason.
communications.
He's helping
UCSB.
wellness, he's helping, I mean, there's a lot of UCSB people, but not public affairs.
That's what I meant, because they do the press strategy.
not
Okay,
public
so I'll
affairs,
follow
yeah.
up with that.
There was a discussion about how the sheriff's office in years past shared the arrest and citation log with UC Santa Barbara and Santa Barbara City College for verification of how many arrests and citations were to enrolled students, and how that has not happened over the last number of years. This to me was very perplexing. And so, the sheriff's office had made a statement that I'm not going to repeat because they later acknowledged that it might be false information about what percentage of the arrests and citations were UCSB students. And so there was some discussion, and I don't know if we got to a place of commitment, but I think the general sentiment in the room was that it's important that this data is being shared with our educational partners for them to do these verifications, if anything, so that we have the data about to what degree this is an out-of-towner problem present during any given unsanctioned event. UCSB also stated that they do not use that data to discipline students. I mentioned the working group. There was also discussion clarifying something that was said at our board meeting by Lieutenant Tesla, that citations and arrests would be eligible for the district attorney's restorative justice program. And there was an acknowledgement made that that statement was not true. And a clarification that citations are not eligible for that program. There was also a statement made that there may be further diversion opportunities within the court system to avoid that going on someone's permanent record. And I personally encourage anyone that's listening to reach out to the public defender's office if they've received a citation or arrest. And that, yeah, anything else that you want to share just about the discussion?
One more thing with the false information about the process with after receiving a citation or arrest on Deltopia. I did personally ask a question to Lieutenant Schmidt about them making it more clear what that process looks like after receiving something like that. And he did sound interested. He did say that he did ask me to clarify that and make sure that he understood like what was wanting to be clarified and that we could work on that in the future. So that was one of the results of that.
The process of what happens to someone after they get arrested, or what happens to someone after they get
what
cited.
options they have, because they did acknowledge that I think they said the only thing that is eligible was public intoxication and other ones are not eligible. We also asked for the demographic of what citations or arrests were, like under what, like minor in possession, things like that, which they said they didn't have. So
Didn't have?
they said that they didn't at the time.
Oh.
They said I think what they said was just that they didn't have it. But that was something that we were interested in learning more about. Maybe we can figure that out in the future.
So that's our report from Isla Vista Safe. I want to give Kyle a special shout out because this is your first time at Isla Vista Safe, and I thought that this was a very, gonna put it bluntly, this is a tense meeting, and I think that you did a really excellent job of uplifting the community concerns that we've discussed here in a really forthright and direct way. So, thank you. Director Dashkin.
So, is it the case that you didn't get at the Ivy Safe meeting a breakdown of citations, arrests for out-of-towners versus in-towners?
Yes.
That's correct.
There was
You did not get any.
there was a number stated which was later walked back because it was acknowledged that that number was a estimate or a gut feeling.
They had said that it was based on what they were verbally told and not actually verified. So there was no way to actually like validate that statistic. Which is when the discussion had opened about UCSB having that because they can cross-reference if it's actually a student who's enrolled.
So how is it left? Are they going to provide that information?
I think they're seen willing to work with UCSB on it, but I think there needs to be proactive,
A request?
by
Yeah,
student
because I
affairs.
think this number really drives our strategy for next year. I mean, it's essential to know out-of-towners versus, I'm just gonna say in-towners, but I know it's not the right word. Because if there's a lot of out-of-towners, our strategy might be a little bit different than if it's more people that are local, right? So, is that something, so UCSB needs to make that request
I think
officially?
if it wanted to happen, it needs to be proactively asked for. It might not happen on its own.
Because it was the case during COVID that there was that flow of information
That was acknowledged.
all the time,
That was
every
acknowledged.
week.
Yeah, I think that the concern was whether there were repercussions for students that were cited or arrested, but I don't remember who it was that had clarified.
Suzanne, is that Suzanne?
Yeah.
Wilson?
Had clarified that there was no disciplinary action, only a letter of concern sent to any students on the list.
Okay, I can follow up on that.
Any other questions about Ivy Safe report out? Okay, well, and the last thing too that mentioned that I think we may get some more information on sometime soon with a town hall is Supervisor Capps did a brief announcement that the rental housing inspection program was adopted by the Board of Supervisors and will be commencing in the summer. So that is our report. Any public comment on Isla Vista Safe report out? Henry, go ahead.
Welcome back, right? So first of all, I want to commend the owner of the property at 6584 Madrid for following through with the Isla Vista Foot Patrol and Sheriff's Office with concerns of the encampment that was over there. Very unsavory folks that were in there. There was fentanyl and meth involved. And I want to commend the Isla Vista Foot Patrol for raiding that property on Friday and mitigating that issue. I mean, there was even a crime scene investigator there. When you got CSI involved, the I stands for intense, not investigation. Now let's go to Isla Vista community in general. There was a study I did back in 2003. It was a little study I did for a friend of mine in the Isla Vista Foot Patrol. There was a crime spike in Isla Vista. What led to that crime spike? Who were the participants in the crime spike? We'll start with who. The study that I did at the end of the day yielded that from Thursday night to wee hours Sunday morning, somewhere between 75 to 87% of all citations, police calls, arrests, in Isla Vista were SBCC students from 18 to 20 years old, not enrolled in UCSB, who lived in Isla Vista, mostly the majority being male. We're talking crimes, everything from as minor in possession, open containers, public to assault with a deadly weapon. Need I remind everybody about March 19th, 2025. SBCC student from Concord, California, the hard streets of Concord, shot a person. And then they found more weapons in his dorm room at Tropicana Gardens. So I think that figure still holds true. What caused that increase in crime? At the time, I believe UCSB had bought Francisco Torres the year before, and everybody who wasn't a UCSB student was removed from there, and they all came to IV. And, nothing against SBCC. I mean, I've gone there and stuff, but unfortunately, as a parent, if I had my kid wanted to go to SBCC, but living in the party school capital of the world, Isla Vista, California, 13 miles away from campus, that would raise a red flag for me. This is why I have 5 cats, no kids. With that said, we talk about, let me go back to the situation with the car wash, the abandoned car wash behind Egg and Bottle. Individuals that start those things, they're predatory in nature. They're predatory. I'm not going to lie to you. They're, predatory. They prey on their own community, the unhoused, and they prey on the student community of Isla Vista. Be it through stealing their property or trying to sell them, things like fentanyl. We know how that works out. I think the biggest thing about IB Safe is to just make a point to Isla Vista residents, just be vigilant. Be aware, buddy system, with regards to sexual assaults, a lot of times too, like there was a most recent case in the Penn report that I read where a person contacted the SART team, but then refused to press charges on the assailant. How many cases of that happens? How many refusals to press charges or pursue the case occur? There's a lot of ifs, a lot of questions about it, but long story short of it, as Isla Vistans, we need to take care of each other, watch over each other, be your own brothers or sisters keeper. That's all I ask. That's all I ask of anybody here in IV. You know, like I say, we're not a city, we're not a town, we're a community. Let's start behaving like one. Let's start watching over each other. If you see something that's wrong, chances are it is. Get in touch with the proper agencies, authorities, whatever. Don't be afraid. You're not the one doing the wrongdoing. Somebody else is. I can't tell you how many instances we have in our apartment on Segovia. Things. Another thing too, and I promised somebody that I would ask about this, the UCSB alerts. They need to reach to the regular community as well, not just UCSB students. Because truthfully, 90% of crimes that have been solved have been due to be of regular residents of Isla Vista who are not enrolled at UCSB. The chicken murderer, the gaucho grabber, I could go on, the list goes on. And those cases were solved by community involvement from people not enrolled in UCSB. You know, there's so many cases of that. But UCSB needs to reach out to the regular residents of Isla Vista with the UCSB alerts. There was one particular incident. There was a guy at Embarcadero Hall waving a knife, threatening people. And law enforcement has a certain dispatch time to get to the scene of a potential crime or a crime in progress. By the time they got there, it was joint UCPD, IVCSD. The suspect was gone. And then they saw an individual in an orange shirt and black pants that fit the description. Turns out it wasn't him, but you know, and everything got sorted. But there needs to be more communication between UCSB and the regular residents of the community who are not enrolled in UCSB for those UCSB alerts. Is there a sign-up list for that? I could talk to Alex Yao at UCPD about it. There should be, because all it is one mass text. That's all it really is. Electrons travel 186,000 miles per second. Just push a button and they're gone. Notify the community. That's who's going to get you the results on crimes occurring and stuff like that. So that's just my 2 cents worth on that.
Thank you for your comments. You have any other public comment, Jonathan?
Just general public comment.
General public comment? Okay, after this item, I think I'll go back to that. I'll bring it back to the board for any final thoughts. Director Freeman?
On said note, I feel like this should maybe come up at some kind of a future IV safe meeting or something, but the inclusion of community in like investigations. I mean, this also came up recently with the person who had fallen from the balcony on campus. And then there was only months later, after there was push from the parents, was there now like canvassing the community of like, hey, there's this person who she was with a couple hours before. Does anyone know who it is? And like within a day, somebody was like, yeah, actually, I know who that guy is. They were able to get the guy in and interview him, actually the thing. But it was like without the asking the community, I feel like the police aren't really spending the time individually, or maybe just in some sense can't, in order to do the kind of investigation that they require in order to make everyone feel comfortable with the things that are going on. In that case, I will say that like if you went through her Instagram account and went through the people she was following, you could within 15 minutes find that person. By the time I ended up contacting, somebody else had already put in the information. But like it's like these aren't necessarily even difficult to investigate things, but the police are not investigating them and they're not bringing in the community in order to do that investigation for them. So yeah, I feel frustrated in a sense because like, so I want to get clarification. So Kasla lied to us, or like just completely didn't understand? He was very confidently stated information about the diversion and how that would work. And we went back and forth with him for a while on that one. And he was just very, like, he was very proud about like how everything was operating and everything. And like, it was just, like, I don't understand, like what do we think happened there? Like,
Wait, sorry, what are you talking about?
Of the diversion, that the false information and the thing that came up during the IV Safe report and everything. I'm just sitting here like trying to did he just completely not understand? Like, wait, was there, what was the color on like him saying that like this was false information? So like, like I'm sorry, I was told wrong by these people, or is it like, actually it turned, what was going on there?
So the conversation around the citations and the diversion program was a clarification that there's difference between how citations and arrests are treated. Citations are particularly when it comes to minor possession of alcohol and open containers. They are what's called direct file, which means that law enforcement agencies directly file those citations with the court, or they choose not to file those citations with the court. That's how the Isla Vista the Sheriff's Office Restorative Justice Program works, is that in lieu of filing the citation with the court, the person who received the citation takes a class. Does that part of it make sense?
Yeah.
So the restorative justice program that the district attorney's office offers does cover a lot of the common arrests. It was unclear exactly which arrests because they did not have a list of all the charges that could potentially be eligible for the program. However, they did say that some of the drunken publics may be eligible for the charges. In my own conversations with their office, they are unlikely to file any of the drunken public charges unless they are accompanied by a second charge, such as providing false information to an officer or resisting arrest, or something else of that nature that escalated that incident. So I think Lieutenant Tesla, when we asked some of these questions and kind of forced the issue based on the information that some of us had learned, clarified that there are ways for people in the courts to receive their own sort of diversion. We didn't get any specifics about what that was, but does that answer your question? And you want to add anything to that?
I can add really quick. The court diversion is, the court tells you can go do an alcohol class, like case, and then they wipe the ticket. I've done that.
Yeah, so he did say that there are diversions in that sense, but it was different than what was originally discussed during our own IVCSD meeting.
That's what I'm trying to understand. Was it was like he was misinformed, or did we get any kind of a
I
color
don't
on
think
like?
that there was really any like
Okay.
acknowledgement of that. I think it was more just clarification on the limitations of the program in terms of like what is eligible. But that was all. And that was mainly done from the representative of the
District attorney.
the district. Yeah, he had answered those questions, and Tesla had just reiterated that there was a court diversion method for some charges.
Thank you.
I just have a question. Is diversion the same as restorative justice? Is it just two different names for two different
Same
entities?
same family of things.
And just a question to leaving behind the present and going into the future. I think on our long range calendar for IV Safe, we've got something about communication of emergencies.
Yeah.
Did I remember that right?
Emergency preparedness.
I think I put that on there.
Yeah.
Not preparedness, communication.
Yeah, I remember us having a conversation about, regardless of what it is, I think it should be on there. I agree with Director Freeman and that it's frustrating as a long-term resident to not have access to that information without going and finding it on the website. Go ahead.
I had a question about that. Is there like, I don't know if anyone would know this, but kind of like how you can receive Amber Alerts, like maybe through the police department versus like it being on UCSB to send out alerts to the entire community? Like has there ever been a discussion about that? Like some type of timely alert from the police department specifically? Or
I believe there was a discussion many years ago that I think we had at the board about how the sheriff's office does have the capability to send out alerts to the community through a subscription service called Mixel that you can sign up for. They do not treat that service though as a timely warning system. Most of the things that I get from Mixel are information about blood drives.
So this is something we can agendize for the future if we want to. So one of the reasons that UCSB sends out the alerts that they do is because there's a law by the Department of Education. It's called the Clery Act, CLERY, and it basically states that within a certain, I want to say a mile, maybe, radius of university property, that if there is certain classifications of crimes, alert has to be sent out to the UCSB students, faculty, who's ever on that listserv. And so that's why there's so many alerts that go out of things happening in Isla Vista. And we've talked about this idea of expanding or having the sheriff's department mirror the alerts that are going out by UCSB, because that's their responsibility. And I'm not sure if it's a technological issue or it's a philosophical issue as to why they don't use the system that way. But it's worth talking about.
Do you happen to know if the UCSB alert system sends out alerts regarding cliff falls?
I would say probably not, because if it's not touching or in a certain radius of university property, no.
Actually, if the cliff fall occurs on UCSB property, yes, they do. Like, for example, the young woman that fell off behind Manzanita Village, they did send me word about that. But
Yeah.
I didn't get one as a regular community member, and I live within that mile radius.
But you're not gonna get it
Exactly.
because you're not affiliated with UCSB.
That was my point.
The
So
property has to be within a radius, not a person within the radius.
I did not get an alert about the girl who fell off.
That was a very.
No,
that was-
this was many years ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
Two
yeah,
years
I was
ago.
gonna say.
I have an impeccable.
So I think that the scope of this discussion at Ivy Safe that I would hope would be about the eligibility of long-term residents for ECSB student system, and a discussion about the sheriff's office capability of implementing a system like UCSB's. And I know, and I kind of didn't get all the way into it when you asked the question right now, Director Howard, about how we talked about it before. We've talked about it when there have been incidents that have come up frequently. I can think about when there was someone who's barricaded himself with a knife at Pescadero Loss, and there was a large SWAT team presence, and other various shelter in places that have happened. From my recollection, if UCPD is involved in those incidents, oftentimes the alert does go out, but it is, of course, just to UCSB.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering specifically with the 2 bear sightings recently. Like,
That was on UCSB property.
yeah, I'm just wondering, like, even with it was originally seen in front of the Santa Ynez Apartments, and,
Yeah.
you know, like, I mean, if I were a local resident that didn't receive those alerts and I just walked outside and
Yeah.
saw a bear, that would be concerning, but yeah,
Yeah,
maybe that could be a good
100%.
reason to initiate a new conversation about it.
Yes. Okay, so that will be a topic for future Ivy Safes. Jonathan, is there anything else on the list of future Ivy Safe discussions?
The peer-to-peer program, whenever or however we bring that back. And state of IV on sexual assault services and response.
Excellent. Yeah, that was one of the items we didn't get to at this Ivy Safe, was state of Isla Vista. And for those that were in attendance weren't in attendance at the state of IV, the gist of it was crime is down. We've got work to do when it comes to medicals,
But also down.
but also slightly down. Okay, I agree.
But they'd be late.
Okay,
Excellent. Yeah.
nice. I like that. Very on brand. Okay, we're gonna close the Isla Vista Safe item. I'm gonna return briefly to general public comment because it sounds like we have a speaker online, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Speaker, please go ahead.
Hello, folks. It's been a while since you've heard from me. So I'm thinking I'm giving myself one last chance here. And after this, I'm not going to feel bad anymore. But there was one item back in the day when I worked on Isla Vista stuff. There was one item that I wanted to do, but didn't have the technical know-how and didn't have the data to complete. And I want to give it one last shot to see whether this is possible. After this, if we can't do it, I'm moving on. But basically, when I was working on IV, I wanted to do a study there's about 1,000 parcels in IV. And I wanted to do sort of a comprehensive study on the properties. And it would go back, say, using assessor data to, from the last time I checked, about 1975. And so I think I thank Jonathan for pointing me to your board rules. Maybe what I can do is come back and actually, if you guys are interested in this, do an actual formal presentation, put it on the agenda. But the things that are in the way of getting, the basic issue is, how do I get the data? The county has the data, and there are two ways possibly to get the data. One way is I would pay for it, which could be pretty expensive given the way per my conversations with the assessor's office. The other option is an IT guy in the assessor's office told me that they would give the data for free if, say, the IVCSD requested it. So, I think the last time a study was done on Isla Vista was probably after the bank burning, and maybe around the time when they founded the Park District. So this would be, from my knowledge, the first time a study was done since data has been digitized. And I think it would be a very interesting study. There's different ways this study can go. You can start off with the base data of assessor data, but you can add data like planning data to it. You can add, you can even do sheriff data. So you can map crime over a number of years and see how crime has changed. But again, the first issue is getting the data. And then the second issue is having the technical know-how to put the data into like a GIS, like an ArcGIS map, or I know Jay has the knowledge to do that, but even without Jay, I think I could do it. I think I can get the technical knowledge to do it. But I think the question for the board, and maybe I should come back with a formal agenda item for this, is would the board be interested in, say, doing a joint project? And I'm in school right now, so it's an academic project, but would the board be interested in doing, say, a joint project between the county, UCSB, and the IVCSD? That would be one way to do it, or the IVCSD could do it alone. But sort of do this big study, and maybe the data could live, for example, at the UCSB library, and then other students can use the data to do studies on that, can use the data to do other studies. I know I believe you can't really interact with me because we're in public comment, but if you think that maybe I should come back with an agenda item, I could draft something up and send it to Jonathan. I don't know if you're allowed to respond to that, or if you have any comments for me or questions for me to explain more. I want to be respectful of your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Plotkin. And just for the record, can you state your name?
Yeah, Josh Plotke.
Thank you very much. And I will respond by saying I received your email and I haven't responded yet, but I'm looking forward to. I appreciate your attention on this project. Director Freeman.
I think I'm allowed to ask a clarifying question on like a phrase I didn't understand what you meant. Am I allowed to?
Go ahead. Yeah.
You kept saying a study of the properties. Studying what? What are we studying? I didn't understand that.
Well, based on the limited time, I didn't explain, but there's many ways this could go. There's like things that I'm personally interested in, like things that I would like to find out, sort of. And then there's things that the board might be interested in finding out. There's things that the sheriff's department might be interested in finding out. UCSB might be interested in different things. The county, 3rd district, I guess the 2nd district now office might be interested in finding out. So I could tell you what I'm interested in finding out, which, one question for me would be, for example, is how has the prices of property in Isla Vista changed since 1975, for example? That would be one question I'm personally interested in. Another question is how has ownership changed, over the years? Has it sort of, has it always been this diffuse, the ownership, or has it gotten more consolidated or less consolidated? These are some personal things I'm interested in. If I was to be able to get sheriff data, I think the question would be, how has crime changed, say, over the years, and has the type of crime changed, and then has the type of crime changed, and then has the amount of crime changed? So, and then, yeah, so that's yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment, Mr. Plucky. Looking forward to being in touch.
Likewise. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Okay, we're gonna move on to item 4.3, the Public Works and Sustainability Budget.
All right, so we are hard at work at the Finance Committee to put the budget together, and we had a pretty efficient meeting last time, and we got through half the budget pretty much. And so I'm gonna just overview where we're at so far. And we do this in pieces so that the board can give feedback on the process or on the decisions of the Finance Committee so that it can all be tied up neatly at the end.
To see that. Sorry.
You can't see that, yeah, sorry. Well, it's attached as well.
Yeah, no, I'm looking.
So I'll go through this in terms of like the general categories of things that were funded, but if you do want to get into the details of each item funded, this is a new format we're doing this year. We funded everything individually instead of, usually you get a budget with everything added up and just the major line items. But we did zero-based budgeting this year to try to reduce our budget and, close our deficit. So we funded things one at a time.
Can you define zero-based budgeting?
Yeah, the budget starts at zero and then you add things one at a time. And so we add all of these things were consciously added instead of just assuming that was in the budget last year. So it just needs a little more money next year or something like that, or cut it a little bit. Everything was broken up. So the staff budget was broken up into all the positions. So what the Finance Committee decided on so far for the Public Works Sustainability Department is $480,000 total so far. That would include 3 full-time positions, our director and our 2 program manager and project manager. And then we'll also have staffing for litter pickup, street sweeping 4 times a year, graffiti abatement for the current coverage we have, flyer removal on public spaces, and then working during move out and our compost pile maintenance. So we have staffing to do all of those things. We have budget for power washing to do 40 tags a year and cleaning the rainbow sidewalks once a year. We have a budget for power washing the loop and Pardal once a year. We have our move out contract to have litter picked up during move out. We have our other move out activities to store items over the summer, to pick up good items and to help with our movement sale. We have our, this is a new idea of having a lighting distribution program to buy lights to distribute for free to the public, to help light the public right-of-ways like we're doing with the trees, but with lights instead. We have our tree program. We have a maintenance fund for our equipment for both composting and Ivy Beautiful. And then we have money for 3 educational campaigns, 1 per quarter, and some year-round marketing materials. So that's the Public Works and Sustainability budget. It adds up to $480,000. And if you go into the spreadsheet, you'll see it's all broken down by outputs, like what is actually produced by the money. And we'll finish filling out all the outcomes, which is the results we want to see, and then the strategic goal that it ties into in the strategic plan, and the consequence if not funded for the things that are existing in the budget that got added back. So you would be able to know the results if we keep something or not keep something.
And I'd just like to say that this is kind of a tentative budget because we haven't really added everything up yet.
Yeah.
So we're not saying we can afford it necessarily. But we tried to focus on what we thought were the core important activities in this program. And do you have a number for us that would be what we spent in the current year on this that would be somewhat comparable to the 480,000 that we're talking about for a recommended budget for next year?
Yes, let me pull that up. And it is a little tricky to give that since we switched the compost collective, where it is in the
Yes.
budget, but what the quick and easy version is. Oops. One quick second. It's 452,000. So it's a $30,000 increase.
So that's a concern.
Yeah, but that's between all of the
Yeah.
programs and yeah,
So this
between the
is-
raises.
Still needs refinement.
I will add to, you can't see it on this document because I think this one was done a little bit different than the next one that we're gonna look at, but in the column D, you should be able to see the amount that a specific item costed last year. And so if there's no amount in that column, then that's a new item.
Yeah.
And if there is an amount, then that's an ongoing item. Which I found particularly helpful as we're looking at what's new and what's existing.
We haven't
Shouldn't-
added the old
Oh, okay,
spending on. column
okay.
Director Freeman.
On a related note, I mean, I appreciate that the methodology to construct the budget was zero-based budgeting, but to the extent to which we are then diffing against the previous budget, I think it's useful to be able to see the things that are not
Yeah.
funded.
It was just, that was a request during the committee meeting. So
Yeah,
we're
no,
still
it's
at, we
very
haven't
helpful.
added it yet.
Yeah, the things that are not being funded are at the top of the sheet.
So-
Yeah, or yeah, I guess
Or
they
they're
haven't been
recommended.
discussed. Yeah, oh yeah. Because the committee asked to put together a budget for public art to see if we want to fund it or not. So yeah, it just hasn't been added in yet.
Director Block.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna mention that, since there's only a few things, like, should we ask the broader board about the things? I guess it's more of an issue for the next budget, for the things that we chose not to fund. See if they have any opinions on that. Or is that just like?
Yeah, no, it is a good question for the board. It is just the one right now that's public works, but I don't think it was like chosen not to fund. It didn't
Yeah,
have a
that
number
one,
yet. Yeah,
I'm more for the community programs, but there was a few that we were unsure about.
yeah, I can go over those when we get to that one for sure.
Director Deschler.
So, I have a question. I like the layout. I think I'm, understand it a little bit. But what I wanted to ask is, I'm confused because, you're saying that this is the funded amount, but it's not really the funded amount. It's more of the, if we have the funding, this is what we prioritize.
What
amount.
we've chosen to fund,
Okay.
yeah, from the list of, so all of these were on a menu list.
Yeah.
And then we picked what seemed important. I will say, we probably could afford this.
Yeah,
As is, probably yes, because I mean, yeah, I've plugged in the numbers and these two departments, they represent the majority of what we do, and this adds up to half of the tax.
Public Works and Sustainability.
Yeah.
Those are two. Got it.
Yeah, from my perspective, on the budget committee with Carrie and Edward, I think what would be helpful is if the board has items that they see here that they would especially like to prioritize, that you voice that now so that we know that as we continue through the budget process.
In the funded section
Yeah,
or in the
like
unfunded?
Any
Anything.
section.
Okay.
Director Freeman.
I'm still trying to understand that, so like, one project that I looked here to see if it was in the funded, or now that I see there's a not funded section, as I was, but for all I know, we weren't actually funding it last year, and I just wasn't paying enough attention. But, the community garden, there are
not
numerous
part
reasons
of-
why I would think
Yeah,
that we
we're
wouldn't
not
be
there
funding
yet.
it.
We're not, they haven't given their annual report yet. We haven't discussed it at the finance committee, so.
Okay.
It's just not,
So this just doesn't include
It
things we
wasn't-
haven't. done
doesn't
the
include it
report on.
because it hasn't been brought to us yet. So next, in June, that will be on here. They're doing their annual report next
Whatever.
meeting in 2 weeks.
I was trying to understand the format. of
No, I
the-
get it. It will be in there eventually.
Because I was also thinking maybe it's because it was like funded from UCSB things, and
Yeah.
that's why like maybe it's not on the thing, but this includes the UCSB funded things, and this we're not.
It technically it could, but we haven't decided specifically what to use the UCSB money next round for. And I think we were thinking the festival and the safety stations, which would not be in here yet.
Okay.
Director Deschler.
I wanted to ask the question about the move out hauling for you
Yes.
contract. When I look at it, $20,000 for a weekend, essentially, maybe a week.
It's not, it's 3 to 4 weeks.
Oh, it is 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Because then I look at the compost pile, it's 30,000, huge sum of money for the moving out. It's a huge chunk of change. And so what I wanted to ask is, what is Marburg's, I probably ask this every year, what is Marburg's responsibility for getting trash out of Isla Vista?
Yeah, they pick up trash bags, but like a lot of trash is not in bags. So
Got
we
it.
bag the trash, we organize it. 442-gallon bags of trash equals 16,000 gallons of trash that we packaged
That's
up.
hard. I need it to look like a football field. Like how
Yeah.
many football fields? is that?
I don't know what,
No,
I
I'm
don't
just
know.
teasing.
I don't
But
think
it's
in
hard for me to
football fields,
visualize
yeah.
that.
But you know, if you look at the annual report Jenna gave last meeting,
Yeah,
that it went over this in detail, of what was
okay,
done.
sorry, I was.
Yeah. So it's
I was in
100,
Sacramento
yeah, it's
doing
okay.
UC work.
It's okay, but yeah, it's 100 hours per week for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And they bird dog with Marburg, so they go first. So that we know where Marburg's going,
Mhm.
so we go clean up, and then Marburg follows, and then they have a faster time
Yeah.
grabbing the trash. So,
It's important.
and we
Sure.
can't hire staff during this time because of the students are at finals week and such. So
Yeah, yeah.
so it is more expensive than if we did it in-house.
Okay, any other thoughts about things to prioritize or questions about items in the budget? Dr. Dashler.
Sorry, I'm talking so much, but I hope that there can be some funding for the public art and the murals. I think that's creates so much community to be able to have that. I was in Santa Cruz last weekend, and gosh, every wall has art, and it is just you almost don't notice it, but it's just a great feeling. And when you do, it's really nice. It really creates a lovely sense of community. So I would say if there's money for that.
Director Free.
The Public Works and Sustainability Director a full-time job?
It's Jenna.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
The Waste Reduction and Division Program Manager, is that a half-time job?
It's full-time.
Why does it say 20 hours of scouting per week?
They do other things, but
Oh, okay,
that's
okay.
the main.
Oh, okay, I was just
deliverable of
like,
the
that's
job.
the output is like,
They
the output we get for this line item is 20
Yeah.
hours, and so that's how I was doing it.
Yeah, I guess
Right.
the commas are confusing, but it's 20 hours of scouting and the other things. For the other 20
Oh,
hours.
okay, all right.
I'll write
okay,
that better.
okay.
but
Then I was just like, shouldn't
yeah,
that?
I just
would be
wanted to
like
put that in
not
because like it's a
similar?
core
Okay.
function of the role.
Okay,
So it's like
okay, all right.
it does that plus these things.
Okay, I just, yeah.
Okay, any further comments or questions on
I
public
will-
works? Go ahead.
Has there been any discussion with UCSB regarding taking over the GIVE program?
I mean, I think there's just been a general idea that if Viviana retires, who
Yeah.
will run the gift program,
Okay,
but no offer or like formal discussion,
Okay.
just a thought.
yeah, okay, thank you.
I will say it's an expensive project with a lot of work that goes into it. It costs like
Huge.
$60,000.
Is that right?
That's the last budget I remember from before COVID. I don't know what it is now.
Wow, that's huge.
Okay, I'm gonna open up public comment. Any public comment on public works and sustainability budget? Go ahead, Esma.
Yes, I don't have a lot today. I didn't get a chance to look at those items. Nor was I planning to, but I do want to support, board member.
Me,
Yes,
Kirsten,
Kirsten?
yeah.
Okay, board member Kirsten's comment about the artwork. It's something that's important to the culture, heritage, character of our community. So,
Thank you for your comments.
you know,
Anything online, Jonathan?
No.
Okay, back to the board. I think we don't need a motion for this. We've gotten some good feedback on this one. And thanks for your attention. Let's go to community programs budget.
Okay, so this one, what's been chosen to be funded so far is 445,000. It's our director, our 2 project managers. One thing that's new is an intern. One intern who does about 10 to 20 hours a week, and then keeping our contract event staff, which is currently in the budget. We're gonna have a maintenance fund, which we did not have this year, for replacing incidentals, like these tables, if some are broken, for example. We're gonna have a pretty large marketing budget, Instagram ads, enough to hit 100,000 impressions, marketing specifically for the events we put on and classes we put on for the 2 to 3 events per quarter, money for our tabling initiatives to be out there in the community, money for doing 2 door hangers per year. So that's $2,500 to hit one in the beginning of the year and one during Deltopia. Other equipment we need, we run the IV Community Network now, so we want to have food for the 4 meetings per year just to make sure people come. We want to have branded materials for IVCSD as giveaways. And I think there was a comment in the Finance Committee on getting clothing for the directors and staff that has the logo. Money for our website, which has gone up in cost. Having funding to sponsor community events, 1,000 per quarter, so that we can amplify our reach by partnering with events already happening and just supporting them. Having money for unified branding, which is our email system, or I lost the word now. our Canva system, which is makes our graphics and our QR codes. Our cliff safety ads, which we budget separately for, just to make sure we are doing those all year and you might have seen them. They're like our, how to be smart around your cliffs ads. $2,500 to make 4,000 flyers to have on hand for the year for general purpose, and then $1,500 to refresh our brochures. Pest control services, small one, $900. $30,000 to keep our 5 times a week cleaning, maintaining our guitar lessons for $6,300, weekly yoga classes for $2,000, weekly dance classes for $8,000, weekly mothering classes for $9,600, weekly coffee hour for homeless individuals, $4,200, and then our leadership initiative class at the base level, $1,000. But then also we added $500 for an opening and closing celebration for retention. We added $2,000 to have stipends for the students who get 100% attendance to, again, have more retention. And then $1,000 to videotape the classes so that we can use that in the future. And then $400 for our volunteer management software, $1,000 for volunteer appreciation, and $1,000 for drink test kits, $1,500 for the vending machine basic operations, and then $2,000 for new supplies the community has asked for, such as more syringes and PRP. That's the proposed community programs and engagement department budget so far.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board about priorities?
What does CLI stand for? I know
Community
it's the
Leadership Initiative.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
It'd be nice to spell that
yeah.
out for people who don't know.
Director Sebas.
Why are we in charge of the cliff safety ads, not IV, what is it, RTD?
They don't have anything to do with the cliffs. I mean, our cliff safety ads are about private property.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's more education for that's not what they do.
thanks.
Yeah, and I think this really stemmed from when there were the series of deaths that happened, and wanting to look at how we can contribute to the effort, since a lot of the actual enforcement and safety responsibility falls on the county. We wanted to be able to have a hand in being helpful while recognizing that we're not the authority. Other questions from the board? Go ahead.
One of the
non-funded. Oh, what's that?
Yeah, I was about
Just reminded
to get to that. One of the things that we were discussing in finance committee was whether or not we should have another intern position to like manage the volunteers. And that was $10,000. It would be $10,000 additional. And I was just wondering what other people might have opinion, or if there's any opinions on that.
What would be like an outline of what they would do?
It would be a volunteer coordinator. They keep up with the volunteers, call, follow up, make sure they, show up to their shift, recruit new ones, call through lists and try to get people to sign up for specific volunteer
Does
options.
someone do that right now?
I think it's like spread out a little bit, not dedicated work.
Yeah, this was one of the things that we didn't get to funding that I see as a super high priority if we find that we do have the funding for. I made a great case for both of the interns. So the first intern was more of a marketing communications related, and this one is more volunteer related. And so I hope this is one that we can get to if we have the funding available. It seems like that's one of the priorities.
We also said we can split the one we did put in into volunteer and content, so they don't have to be either way. Like they don't have to be one or the other. But you know, the more you do of this one, the more time you free up from the permanent staff to do other things. So you know, you'd give the more routine tasks to the interns and be able to have our full-time staff be more doing face-to-face communication with people.
Other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, some other things that weren't funded yet, or they're still under consideration, or maybe not, is $5,000 for installing speakers and lights into the walls of the community center, just to make it more professional, and how a lot of other community spaces like the Galita Community Center are set up. And then $3,000 to purchase new couches for the spaces, since the couches we have were donated from the UCSB residence halls from many years ago. I mean, I think they were like decades or a couple decades old by the time we got them, and that was already 8 years ago, so older than that. And then we also had funds for district event incentives, so just having more money to have like food at meetings or food at events, or sometimes we do raffles. And then money to do a focus groups for our brand audit. So we would just help people, incentivize them to attend those focus groups to give us information on improving our brand. Those are the things that are not funded.
Any other comments from the board? I do have one thing that came to mind. I didn't ask this in finance committee, but for both of the equipment needs, can we take that out of our equipment reserve if we needed to?
Yeah, we technically could. Yeah, I mean, of course, that's what it is for, actually. Replacing equipment.
Could you talk about the survivor resource room?
Yeah, it's just not going to be, we haven't gotten to this one yet in terms of annual report and costs and everything. So, but basically, part of it is it's rent. We pay rent for the room to the county. And then there has been funding this year to do different survivor related events. Mine has been leading survivor retreats. I think we only had 2. So we have a 1,200 in there for that, but they don't happen like in the room. They're kind of like auxiliary to it. It's probably, we're talking about like expanding our survivor resources, so the room will just be part of a bigger program.
Okay, any other thoughts on community engagement and community spaces budget? Okay, well, seeing none. I guess I gotta ask, is there public comment? No one else in person, anyone online? Okay, we're gonna close that item then, and we're gonna move to reports. Reports from members of the board. I'll start that I had a chance to attend the IVRPD meeting to speak in support of our application for a roll-off move-out waste bin to be a collection site sited at Rodapel Park. Carrie was there with me online, and the board did vote to approve that. So we will have a site there during move-out to help collect the waste that otherwise would have accumulated in the park. At that meeting, there was also a discussion about IVRPD's decision to discontinue the Adopt a Block program that they run, which is a volunteer coordination program for picking up trash, as well as some minor maintenance and plantings in the park. And I shared with the board, with their board, that waste reduction continues to be a major priority for us. So Given that that is the direction that they are moving with this program of wanting their volunteers to be more focused on parks and less focused on trash cleanup, that we are continuing to be committed to trash cleanup, and I shared my appreciation for their offer to share any information or equipment that might help absorbing more of that volunteer activity into our waste mitigation efforts. So it was a good meeting there. I attended a tree planting at Ivy Elementary School with Jenna, which was super awesome. Got to plant, I believe there was about 19 trees that got planted there.
Nice.
Super fun, great volunteer activity. And that's about it. Any other reports from members of the board? Director Freeman?
I don't remember if I'd given this specific thing. I think I had that with my lease is up in mid-June, so I have like another 2 meetings.
But you're not leaving us.
Not leaving entirely, but I will be leaving this chair.
Okay.
I will have a little placard that says director.
Director
And
Emeritus.
if I show up, I might bring a little placard, bring a little thing that just says member of the public.
We're counting on that. We need more public participation.
Yeah, and I did receive adjacent to that the notice from LAFCO that there will be an election for a vacancy as you were leaving as well. Go ahead.
Are we able to do like outreach for that before the vacancy actually happens? My only concern is like if you see some students going on break, there might be like might be difficult.
We'll look into it.
Okay.
I can't say for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because the last time that we did this, I remember there is kind of a strict calendar for what we can do officially when it comes to putting out like, social media or notices to the public from the district. But I think that we as board members can have private conversations with folks about what we know is coming there.
Right. If people want to come to me trying to get me to accelerate my timeline of leaving, that is an option. That is not something that is off the table or anything by assumption. Might be reasons not to, but I'm just saying, like, if that's helpful for people doing anything, you can ask.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Very helpful.
So your last meeting as a director is what?
Otherwise would be whatever the first meeting of June is.
Okay.
Okay. Reports from standing and ad hoc committees. We got a report from finance. Is there any other committee stuff we need to talk about? Okay.
Our next meeting, which is on June 4th.
June 4th.
Okay. Report from district council.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Report from general manager.
Well, one thing I want to report on is that yesterday we had our annual waste coordination meeting that Jenna puts on between Marburg and the county and lots of different groups. And it was a productive meeting. We did learn that the updated ordinance on trash service in IV will get done this year, but just not until much later in the year because there's a lot of different processes that the county has to go through. But on June 3rd, the staff will go to the Board of Supervisors to ask for permission essentially to start the work of looking at rate changes and updating the ordinance. So that's a big one to look out for. What happens there because, and I'll send you all the proposed ordinance draft, but they did overview it yesterday. It's 6 major changes and a lot of it is around trash service and who signs up for it and how much, and ensuring that all the parcels in IV have enough trash service so that's not overflowing and creating litter in the streets. So it's a big accomplishment for us. That's something we did the data study for to prove that it's needed, and the county then took on the project. So it's a big one. So yeah, June 3rd is when it goes to the county board of supervisors as just not a major decision, just let's start working on it. And then they said end of the calendar year, they'll get it done. Now you already heard about IV Safe, but I will share that I met with Commander Tesla, I guess that's his title now.
Wow.
And just to, debrief his time as lieutenant of foot patrol, and then I met with Lieutenant Schmidt to just start talking about what we can do to work together. We talked about the parking enforcement issues, talked about Deltopia, and there's a lot more to talk about, but we also got to know each other. On parking, the co-op membership program launched last week, finally, after all the hurdles we had to go through. We don't have an actual number on how many memberships have been claimed, but we do know that there was excitement about it and people trying to claim the memberships before it officially opened. So I don't have a number yet for you. It's only really been since Thursday it opened, so 5 days. Also, we heard news today that the county is looking to hire an engineer to implement the lighting plan we put together a year ago. But that means, they have to hire them on July 1st, and then they have to do their job. And then who knows when the lighting will actually be put up. And I think that is, and then obviously the finance committee, and that was a lot of the focus in the last week, was getting that done, is preparing for the finance committee. So that's pretty much my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Director Dashman?
I wanted to add, following up on a comment that was made today, is we've done lighting walks, and I just wonder if we could propose to Public Works to do a accessibility walk.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I'll let
Walk the
Jenna know
loop.
about that. I mean, we've done sidewalk walks where we went and looked for sidewalk issues, but I think doing it like more intentional and with all the
Public Works,
people,
yeah.
like we've done in the past, that's a really good idea.
I mean, maybe we could, I hope this isn't offensive, but maybe we could get people that need that service and don't have it to go with us.
Yeah, or at least talk to them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
It's an excellent idea.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions on Jonathan's report? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to our last item, which is closed session. Council, can you read us in?
Yes, the board will meet on item 6.1, general manager annual performance and salary review. Per section 6.2 of the general manager's contract, the board shall conduct a performance and salary review annually, which is authorized under California Government Code section 54957B1.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We are adjourned to closed session.
Jonathan needs to
Thank you.
put the
You ready?
Yeah.
We are reconvening from closed session. Council, can you report out?
Yes, so the board met in closed session on item number 6.1, general manager annual performance and salary review pursuant government code section 54957B1. Discussion was had and direction was given to staff, no reportable action taken.
We are adjourned to May 27th.
Okay, thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. Bonjour.